Favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right, second action item is the county radio system. The Jolly, Trolley, and Looper edition agreements. So Debbie and Henry, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Very, very well. Henry's going to be my technical backup on megahertz and anything that sounds like it wouldn't be a bean counting thing. Over 30 years ago, Pinellas County and PSTA got together and felt it was in the best interest of the citizens of the county to have one consistent radio system that we would both use. As a matter of fact, every essential service in the county when it comes to emergency and disaster uses this radio system, which is the Motorola radio system. The county actually owns the majority of the system, the frequencies, the transmissions, the receiving sites, and PSTA owns the base stations. We have our own mobile radios, portable radios, dispatch consoles, and our AVL CAD system. PSTA uses the Motorola radio system for our daily operations, and we also use it during disasters. You know, like Irma, et cetera, we use that for activation. From the payment side, PSTA pays our proportional share of usage. And we anticipate for this action item over the next 6 years about $525,000. Included in here is also usage now for Jolly, Trolley, and Looper. They have purchased their own radios, but will be using the system. We're going to be paying $3,000 a year, basically $1,500 each. And I think we decided, in my generosity of the moment, that I would probably bill them, because all three of us are using the system, $1,000. So I'll be getting that money back for Looper and Jolly Trolley. So the action item is for 1 year interlocal agreement with the county for the radio system, with 5 additional optional years, and with the authority for Brad as our CEO to exercise those option years for an amount not to exceed $525,000.
Henry, anything to add on that? Any megahertz or?
Yeah, things I don't understand.
Nothing about megahertz. This is just another example of how if there ever was a call to action for evacuation during a time of need, that coordination of assets, both ours, Jolly Trolleys, and the Loopers, just adds more ability to contribute if there is an evacuation order given. So this is definitely a good thing to have in our toolbox.
Question?
You may have mentioned, I'm sorry I'm late this morning. Is there a reason we're just doing 1 year at a time and not the longer period?
Well, it's for a total of 6 years, actually.
So you have to bring it back every year?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, by doing this, we will be authorizing Brad
Okay.
to approve it
Excuse
every
me.
year.
Thank you.
No, that's a good
Thank you.
question.
That's all I have.
I don't know why I had questioned that too. But
Commissioner Johnson?
And the $525,000 is over the 6-year period?
That is correct, sir.
And is this P25?
Yes, it is. Same public service equipment as the police, fire, sheriff's department.
So right now, Henry, you could go on the radio system and get the sheriff if you wanted to, and then get yelled at.
That's just a different channel that they're on, or?
Yes, it is. We're also tied in with the Emergency Operations Center when we need to coordinate communications as well.
Any other questions?
Move approval.
Okay.
Support.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
For consent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Debbie.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Would you like this on consent or?
Yes.
Consent, please. Yeah. Okay, next action item, that included the Jolly Trolley, correct?
That is correct,
Okay,
yeah.
so the next one would be the master agreement with the University of South Florida.
And I am actually going to take that. I've got Al at DBE training in Atlanta with FTA.
Okay.
He's our new DBE liaison officer. So I will be taking charge on this one this morning.
Okay.
Talking about toolboxes, as we were saying, so it's always good to have something else in your toolbox. Currently, PSTA has a couple of consultants that we use, general engineering contracts. And we felt it was good to add yet another tool in that box. And that would be Cutter, which is the USF Center for Urban Transportation Research. Perhaps do such technical assistance as planning studies, quantitative analysis, and reports. We're looking to do this over a 5-year period with a not to exceed $300,000. There's no obligation to spend anything, but I also think by having another organization at our fingertips, number one, they could maybe provide some specific technical assistance we can't get elsewhere, but it also provides competition when we ask each of the entities, what would you be able to charge for a specific item? So the action item today is for the $300,000 over the 5 years. I apologize, there is no contract that we normally would put with this. Cutter was a little bit slow in getting back to us with their comments. So right now it is in legal review and they're going back and forth between, and Hart is also doing this as a joint procurement between Hart and I think PSTA are on the same block. You put it in?
Yeah, it was
Oh,
put
you
in
did?
Sunday, I think.
Oh,
or
okay.
Yesterday.
I apologize, then the draft PSTA one is in there. It's the same contract that Hart has as well, but it's under legal review.
So it's.
Question? Oh.
Yeah, questions?
Is there a minimum that we have to,
No?
no, okay,
We
just
can-
as.
As needed,
Okay.
as it meets each specific project.
I think this is
situation.
great. I think it's great to have it, I'd like to see more of a relationship built with the university. So that's awesome. Thanks.
I'll hand the meeting over to Chairman Barkley.
Yeah, I apologize, everyone. Apparently was a pedestrian fatality on East Bay, and so they blocked off all the streets, so we had to go through the retirement community. Around, so that's what happened. I apologize.
How long?
So we're reviewing the 3C master agreement.
Okay. Thank
You see
you.
that from Kevin?
All right.
So, do we have a motion to approve this?
I don't believe we have one yet.
I'll move that we approve the master agreement with the University of South Florida.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
For consent?
Would you think consent?
I'd like to see it at least discussed, not because I have any questions, but just to let people know what we're
We'll know what
doing.
we're doing.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to 4A, health insurance update. Debbie, would you walk us through that, please?
All hail the chair. Since I did that just
Sorry,
20 minutes
guys.
ago, so.
Sorry.
Yeah. Never have it in the right position. When I wanted to read, I had to decide.
Fine, you can't set it up with GPS location. Enter this room, it automatically goes.
Thank you for the grand announcement with the good
Right,
work you do.
right. I planned that specifically.
Appreciate that.
Very good, Chair.
Beautiful entrance.
Well, this morning we're going to talk about health insurance. Last year, we spent a lot of time talking about it because over the last couple of years, we've seen an increase of about 90% in our health claims costs. So last year, in response to that, we did a solicitation, and for health insurance companies, we took a look at how to do things differently and came up with some new plans. So we now offer, for the first time, 3 different plans that we put out to our employees. We offered what I call the buy-up plan, which is basically keeping our insurance exactly the way it was in the previous years. Then we offered a new base plan. So in the new base plan, your deductibles went up from $750 to $1,500. The co-pays went up slightly. So before, just taking a look, most of our employees fall within the single employee category. I was paying $23 last year. This year, under my new base plan, I'm paying $29. As you can see, for those individuals who chose to stick with the buy-up plan, they're actually paying quite a bit more.
Per paycheck.
Per paycheck, yes, not per year, per paycheck. There's 26 paychecks in a year. So we also came up with a high deductible plan. And in a high deductible plan for the single employee, it was free. As you can see, we also added in, PSTA put in a health savings account, $200 for the single employee, $300 for employee plus spouse, employees with children, $300, and then family, $400. When we came out with this new plan, we put a lot of effort into education, which is not going to be a one-time shot. We're going to be doing a lot of education as well this year. And we ended up with having 72 employees in the high deductible plan. That equates to about 12% of our employee population. That is really, for a first time, quite a success. For other programs that we reached out to, the first year is more around 10% coming into a new program like this. And what I wanted to do by talking about this and giving a little bit of background is, because this is new, we want to prepare for this coming year. Is it being successful, not successful, and what can we do better? So that is why we're talking about it this morning. I said there will be savings, and I need to be accountable, positive or negative on that. We've had some significant improvements. Last year, at the end of the year, which was our base plan at that point in time, which is our new buy-up plan, our average cost per employee claim was over $1,000, $1,118. Today, on an average, we are looking at $885. And it's broken out by those people in the buy-up plan are up from where they were, $1,400 per claim. The new base plan, which the majority of people are in, $594, and the high deductible, the lowest at $34. Now, we would expect at this point during the year to have a very low cost per employee claim in the high deductible plan, because at this point in time, those employees are taking the money out of their HSA account to pay for things. There's a lot of questions that we came up with as we went through this, and I'm going to be gathering more information. One of which is, in my mind, I felt that all our young, single, healthy people went into the high deductible plan. What I found last night was, in looking at a report, was that actually the average age of people in the base plan and the high deductible plan are essentially the same. In the high deductible plan, the average age was 49.3. In the base plan, it was 50.5. And then in our buy-up plan, that was the biggest difference at 54.3 years of age. So very close range, a lot different than I thought it would be. One of the reports that I've asked for that takes several weeks to get is a specialized report. I want to see what kind of claims, number one, what kind of claims are we having? Catastrophic last year was driving a lot of it. The other thing was also our things like diabetes, high blood pressure, those types of claims. You know, I want to make sure that the people in the high deductible plan, as we talked about a little bit, Brad and I yesterday, we want to make sure that they're going to the doctor. You know, we saw a significant decrease in our claims period when we started our weight loss program. So we're continuing to see that from last January over the last year. But I also want to make sure people are doing what they need to do. Now that sort of brings us to what are we going to do right now and going forward. I'm going to ask Sue Keim to kind of stand up and come around so that the commissioners don't have to turn their back. She is one of my secret weapons. Come on up, Sue. Sue is our new benefits associate. She comes to us from Pinellas County, where she was their benefits manager. So I know she's got a lot of great ideas. And we talked about education yesterday, and one of the things that we talked about was changing people's behaviors. We've had meetings with the union. because the union embodies most of our membership. And we're coming up with all kinds of ideas of whether it's having a what do we call it, telemedic here?
Telehealth.
Telehealth.
Mhm.
Having somebody either on site periodically. We already have in our program where people can do the thing on the phone to look at the doctor.
Mhm.
We want to look at incentives for people. We talked a little bit about yesterday, like if you go to the gym, you get so much as a discount off of your, if you go twice a week. I think you said that there was a Medicare type thing, and we'd also brought that up in one of our meetings. To find ways to incentivize, or to find ways of having, if you've got someone who is a smoker, we know that those cause additional issues. I believe the county also has an increase in the premiums for those folks.
Who are tobacco users and are not successful in completion of a tobacco cessation program. Just to clarify very quickly, I did come from Pinellas County Human Resources. I spent a number of years there with a focus on the benefit plans. My role when I left the organization was managing the employee benefits team. The employee benefit plans themselves did have a different manager over
Okay.
those.
We're putting key work on everything.
That's okay. But yes, we did implement for the very first time in 2018 a tobacco user surcharge. And of course, that was for individuals who were not successful in completing a tobacco cessation program. There are requirements that you have lots of reasonable alternatives for individuals when you implement programs such as those.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've done is I've met with Clifton Larson Allen, and Clifton Larson Allen are auditors, and they have a host of resources available to them. So we've asked them to take a look at our contract, what we're doing with health insurance, to kind of get an independent point of view. I asked them to look at something different every single year that's outside the direct audit realm, but still related to improving operations. So they came back with some great suggestions, one of which is in our actual contract, we do not have performance measures in there. So we are looking to perhaps going forward put performance measures in, such thing as what is your wait time when you call into Cigna's customer service center, and put metrics in and penalties, very similar to what we do with our care ride providers here for our DART program. Sort of say, you've done a bad job, so we're going to take money away. The other thing that they said is we can put into our contract to get rebates on pharmacy for brand names and premium type drugs. The Cigna actually gets a rebate. We're not sharing in that, and we're going to look going forward to say, as we negotiate the next contract, let's put in whether it be 10, 15%, and that will help us to also reduce our costs. So everything is on the table, but we need to constantly be doing something to reduce our claims costs. Because Cigna is, I think, our third highest contract, second or third highest contract that we have here for health insurance. So are there any questions?
Yes. Go ahead.
Not so much question, but
Suggestions?
suggestions or thoughts. And I appreciate the work towards incentives. One of my bigger concerns with the high deductible health plan is that employees are not seeking care or are choosing when to get care based on the policy that they have. So whereas I'm appreciative that PSTA contributed to the health savings account, I think also looking at ways to encourage employees to contribute to their health savings account through a match, so that they don't feel like they have to go out of pocket with their own money in their bank account to get care. They can use money that's already set aside for that. And it'll be very interesting come the next enrollment, what happens as people choose when to get care. So say we have a driver now who's having hip pain. They may delay treatment on that until they switch plans to one with a lower deductible for next year and say, okay, I'll just wait to get that, which will then drive all our costs up in the following year. So there becomes, for elective care or seemingly elective care, which men seem to be a little bit more willing to elect as opposed to just seek. There's an opportunity for employees to move between plans and then shift costs back and forth, and so we need to be sensitive to that. And that's why I feel like if we can get employees to understand how the savings in the health savings account is there to help meet that cost, they'll be less likely to shift and have that met elsewhere. So it's a great first start, and you never know until you jump into it. And I still think it's a tremendous alternative. I just want to make sure that employees are maximizing the plan and not
Right.
shifting their care, because it also diminishes our ability to deliver for our customers as well. If we have employees who aren't well, who are not functioning at their peak because they're choosing to delay care in certain circumstances.
Right, I'm going to have Sue talk for just a minute, if you don't mind. Yesterday, one of our suggestions we put out there was going to places like Publix on any of the drugs that relate to chronic diseases and how that might be helpful for employees.
Sure, so not directly speaking to the health savings account comment that you bring up, although it is a very good one to educate individuals on the importance of what that savings piece really means, putting their own pre-tax deductions from a payroll into that account, and the fact that it can continue with them for their lifetime. But one of the things that we spoke about yesterday was educating our employee population on the resources that are available to them in the community. For example, Publix, Walgreens, and the like, they offer great deals per se on prescription medications, some of them at exactly zero out-of-pocket responsibility for individuals when they purchase or receive those medications. And when they take advantage of that, not only does it save at the member level because they're not remitting payment there at the pharmacy, but it also saves at the plan level as well because that claim is not running through the PSTA claims at that point.
So there's a lot of things we need to think about, because as well as I am pleased, and I put this chart back up here again, to take a look at how well we're doing, to go from $1,100 down to $885. We know inherently that number will go up to some degree because of the high deductible people taking money out of the HSA at this point. But even if, for the folks, the 72 people who are in the HSA, if they use up their money, which I know can happen pretty quickly, and that dollar amount over there at $34 goes up to $100 or $150 per employee claim, it's still significantly less than where we were at. So there's a lot more analysis that needs to go in. There's a lot more thought that needs to go into the negotiation process this year, as well as education of our employees, coming up with new incentives. And I would look to all of you, because you all have experience in a multitude of places, to come back with me with suggestions like matching.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just a quick question. And I'm not sure exactly how it all works together, except in October or November, employees that haven't gone to the doctor that year get a little note from our health benefits person saying, if you don't get to the doctor or do the blood work or whatever that minimum is, it's going to cost you $500. So it's almost like a disincentive instead of an incentive. And it works because it works for me.
That's important.
So I think incentives are great, but you say, but a disincentive to say, hey, it's going to cost you. And do you have any sense of like the number of folks that are going to the doctor at the county? I mean, a percentage of? Do you have any? Did it work for others, or did the disincentive work for others to make sure?
Yes, I can directly speak to that, Commissioner Eggers. So what Commissioner Eggers is referring to is actually a multi-step plan that we had strategically in the health and benefit realm with Pinellas County government. And what that was is initially we asked people to complete on an annual basis a biometric screening, which is completely free of charge. It's preventative care from a member perspective. And then take the data that they receive from that screening and put it into an online health assessment. What that then did, it gets some actionable items for the member to take steps in order to improve or maintain their health status. And when we started that, we incented individuals with $100 for each of those activities. And as the years moved on, and of course this was a strategic plan that we had, it wasn't just piecemeal, as years moved on, it morphed into a disincentive, to your point, where we now charge an additional $500 in monthly premium,
It works.
or it's divided each month, for individuals who do not complete those activities. I don't know for 2018, but I do know the year prior, we had about 95% completion of those two activities, meaning a very small portion of the population did not complete them.
What was that? I'm sorry.
It was about 95%. And the advantage to the organization when individuals are completing biometric screenings and taking those health assessments is you have aggregate data on the areas to really focus programming that we then offered based upon that.
Well, I mean, I think, to your point, is we're trying to, this is really driving two directions. One, obviously, for long-term reduction in health cost to the organization, but really for our employees. I mean, this is really about just getting people used to going in. And it really wasn't like you have to do a whole lot. I mean, it was just trying to make sure that you either see a doctor or get some blood work drawn or whatever it might have been, and whatever. I just was curious as to how it worked. Just to encourage folks to check.
Yes, and you might have remembered as well, and it's out on public forum, or it was last I knew anyway, we did have some very good testimonials from individuals within the organization who, when they went and had that biometric screening done, they had a trigger, and it made them say, oh, wow, I need to go for follow-up care or whatever the case may be.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, quarterly reports. Form scorecard? Oh, sorry, okay.
Oh, do you want a chart?
Yeah, sure.
It's under Explore.
Okay.
Good morning.
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 Well, this is a pretty exciting day for us. We have come before you many times over the past year and
Thank you.
with key information and decisions about our new performance scorecard. We implemented it on October 1st, the beginning of the fiscal year, and here we are ready to present to you the results for the first quarter of the first year that PSTA has had this in place. We are already seeing much more robust discussions around the organization about our performance metrics, these 5 key strategic areas that we are focusing on. And it's really driving conversations towards improvement to these metrics. So we believe it's already having a great effect. Eric Hovner is part of our Scorecard Champions team. This is a committee that's made up of a representative from each department that works on the development of the scorecard, the gathering and analysis of the metrics, and he's going to explain to you what you're looking at.
All right. Thank you. Good morning. As some of you may recall, at the executive meeting on February 5th, we brought a mock scorecard report. So this same format, but we brought you some kind of mock data just to see, so we could all go through the process of collecting the data, reporting the data, and summarizing it. Here you'll see the actual scorecard results for quarter 1 for fiscal year 18. So that'll be for the first 3, October, November, December of 2017. At first glance, as you take a look at this spreadsheet, the first thing that we can draw your attention to is the very bottom here, so the overall performance ratio. So this is a total ratio. We can see if you at the very top, the quarter one earned points. At the very bottom, the overall ratio for quarter one is 96. It's calculated from a score, and each quarter there's going to be a total score that you can achieve. Quarter one total score was, the total potential was 80, and we scored a 77, which equates to the 96 out of 100.
This is different.
And this is
Yeah.
98.
This is we did better on
Oh, I'm
this one.
sorry.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, there was, I'm sorry.
Use this one.
It is actually this one, I'm sorry, the one on the screen is,
Board two that makes the difference.
yeah, there's one metric on the screen that was corrected. We had an adjustment we needed to make. And you'll see it's the second row at the top. It's the number of funding partnerships per year, so apologies for that. But we can take a look at the actual spreadsheet that's passed out in front of you. So just to go over from an overall layout, from the very top of your spreadsheet, you'll see some general information about the fiscal year, what quarter it's in, and when this scorecard was reported to you. So you'll see that it's fiscal year 18, quarter one, reported at the February board. As you look at the columns in the actual scorecard from left to right, they're first organized by the organizational strategies, the 5 strategies that you have developed. Within each strategies, there are different scorecard metrics, broken down 4 metrics within each strategy. We have a metric code for each metric here, so we can quickly identify what metric we're talking about just from a conversational standpoint. And as you move left, you have the metric description. As you move right, the metric description, the overall performance goal for that metric, and then you have the total potential points for that metric. And then following, you have each quarter and what was the actual results for that quarter for the metric. So one example, Org 1, the first metric at the top, conduct surveys. The overall goal for quarter one was to select a survey vendor. We achieved this goal and received 10 points for this metric. As you see over to the far right of the document, you'll see a year-to-date. So this is either a cumulative or a year-to-date. It's a year-to-date total, so you can see a snapshot saying quarter 2 or quarter 3, how we're doing from an overall year-to-date standpoint. As you go to the bottom, all of this will sum up to the total points that we reviewed earlier. So the total 77 base score, which equates to the 96, which equates to the 98 overall ratio. 2 more things I want to quickly point out to you. So you'll see some colors here. Right now we have some green and red. If you look at the top right of your document, you have a little legend that shows you the achievement percentage for each metric. When a metric is achieved at 90% or higher, it'll be highlighted in green. It'll be highlighted in yellow when it's achieved at 75% to 89%. Then anything 74% or below is going to be highlighted in red to identify our opportunity areas for the agency. So you'll also identify one other quick item. There are a couple of blank items you will notice throughout quarter one. These are items that we are working on, and we are working on these metrics and these results, but it's unable to be measured at this time. The first example I'll just point out is Org 4, is state and federal legislative initiative advancements. For the last quarter, October through December, they were not in legislation was not in session, so obviously we could not have results during that quarter, so we left that one blank. Corresponding to each, let's say, blank item or red item, you'll see notes at the very bottom of the document to help answer any questions that you may have before you even have the questions. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah. Everybody, go ahead. Commissioner Johnson?
So the year-to-date column, that's the average of however many quarters have currently come through?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And so it's possible to earn more points than the goal points for an individual item, for instance, the annual budget variance?
Yes, so the scorecard was developed to recognize scores above and below the target goal for that metric. So there is a potential of 10% bonus points for every metric. It's proportionally allocated, so that's something that's applied to each metric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Yeah, Commissioner.
Yeah, it was kind of along those lines a little bit, and this is all new, so I'm just trying to absorb it a little bit. I like the individual areas and understanding how well you've done against the goals, and it's okay to me, in my mind, to, right now, as I process this, it might change, but to be higher than your goal. But I think, it's almost like let's say in the first one where it was, well, no, because that one's different on that one, but on the second one where it's 26.9, and so whatever, they've done much better than the goal. The financial stability measure has done better than the goal, right? That's what that says.
Which one is 26.9?
The second one, financial stability.
Or 5 through 8.
Oh, the overall.
Oh, okay, I
yes.
gotcha. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that person, that whatever, is done very well on that metric. It almost seems, and again, I don't know how we're going to end up setting all these goals, but that it should almost pass through for a total, so that 26.9, even though you see that they did better in that area, only passes through as a 25, so that when you get down to the bottom, you have a score of, instead of 96, you have a score of 91 or 92, because you could have somebody that's really strong in financial and weak in another, and they've offset, and you've almost, the details are here so you know it doesn't hide anything, but I think the overall rating, you should have these goal levels all the way. I just a thought, it's kind of like each hurdle, but you don't want the,
If you don't want to
really
cloud
one
specific
area.
problem
Yeah,
areas.
anyway, just a thought.
Okay.
But I like, it's pretty nice, I like that.
Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, great, I love it. I think this is really great information. 2 quick questions. When do you think we might have the paratransit net promoter score? Is that something that's in process, or where are we?
Yeah, there's been a vendor selected to conduct that survey, and I believe it's scheduled for Q3 right now.
Q3, okay, great. And then on the operating cost per revenue hour, we exceeded that goal. Available points were 5, we're at 5.4. So it says less than or equal to 115.75 an hour. Was that the goal, or was that where we actually ended up?
That was what it was budgeted for the first quarter.
Okay.
Second quarter, each quarter will have a different goal.
So we beat that.
We beat that.
We beat that. Okay. And just curious, do you know what we beat that by?
I believe it was around 107.
Yes, it was 107 cents.
I know there's a lot of information on here. If it was possible to show what we beat it by on some of these things where we exceeded the goal, I think that just might be interesting information. Just for the board to know, we beat it by this much or we missed it by this much in these categories. So if it was possible to include that, that would be great.
Commissioner Schulman?
So the Q1 goal points, those goal point blocks are going to change every quarter depending on what's happening at that particular time. It's not evenly spread out automatically throughout the year.
That wasn't the initial vision, but now we do have the blank item, so yes. I guess for this first quarter, until those blanks are full, then they will change. The overall proportion of points won't really change for that strategic area, but let's say for the first one, community support, right now there's the blank. So right now only 20 points could potentially be earned for that strategic area.
The goal points that are listed won't change.
Okay.
So Org 1 will always be worth 10 points this year, and Org 2 will always be worth 5 points. But like Eric said, the ones that have blanks will have points added into them as those metrics are able to be measured.
Okay, so there is a goal for Org 4 at some point.
Yes, yeah.
And that will then increase the total number of points in that
Correct, so that will be worth, I believe the goal for the year is 2, and that will show up in future quarters, and the goal points is 5 for that.
Okay, so, so ultimately the base score will be 100.
Will be 100,
Once we get all of the points filled out.
yes.
Okay, I appreciate Commissioner Egger's point about the overall performance. I will say that I feel that this does break down in those individual blocks and actually relatively easily to see, with the color coding, this is an area, this is fine, or whatnot, that, and in any organization, areas that are doing better in one period of time lift areas that aren't doing as well in other periods of time. And so when we're talking about the overall organization, it does reflect the total score the way that it's shown here, with the fact that the detail of each individual metric is readily available. So I appreciate the way it's laid out. I'm still a little fuzzy on how on whether points should be included and just be not applicable or whatnot. And I realize this is a short-term sort of thing, but the legislative one is one that ultimately will keep coming back. And this is state and federal legislative priorities. The federal government was in session in the fourth quarter. The state government wasn't. So if it was a goal of 2, was 1 federal, 1 state, is it still a 0? Not to necessarily penalize for not, we don't necessarily control the agenda of government at those levels, but we're not counting that against us at a point where nothing was happening. So if we're going to give ourselves extra credit on things that are working positively, then even if that's a half point negative, it still happened, right? So otherwise we're just giving points when they're awarded and not necessarily taking them away when something didn't happen, even if it wasn't necessarily in our direct control. So a lot of the things on here aren't in our direct control. If some of them are, but things happen, right? The world happens, and they still reflect in the budget. Like, so if fuel prices spike, and all of a sudden we don't have any cost measures to control that, budgetary financial stability is going to get dinged for something that was really, we did the best we could. And so, I'm not sure that this necessarily, for the metrics that that we can't measure just yet, or it hasn't been fully formulated, I understand. But for some of these other ones, I want to make sure we're not giving zeros where technically a minus might be more appropriate.
Thank you.
You sound just exactly like our state lobbyist when I told him that we were rating them getting a score. That's exactly what they said. You can't do that to us because we have no control over no Senator Latvala or no whatever,
And yet, that's why you're there.
And I said,
find a way.
I didn't say it was fair.
Right.
It was,
And not to be punitive, but to truly indicate what is going on in that quarter with that goal. If we're going to give, like in school, right? If you're on a 4.0 scale, but you wind up with a grade point average of 6.8, then there was a chance to get less than 4 too, right? So this is an instance where it wasn't delivered for whatever reasons, and it should reflect that as well in those areas. I don't get that either.
we did have a lot of debate about this legislative one or for whether to leave it blank or not, and we decided, at least for this first go around, since the state legislative session was not in session, and because our #1 federal priority was the new starts for the Central Avenue BRT, which we had already turned it in the last quarter of last fiscal year. There wasn't really anything.
And so then I realize that that's a point, but then the
will be
goal
one
point
now
should
in quarter
change
2.
every quarter based on what we expect in that quarter. So we could
will,
say,
it will.
well, but we're saying though that they'll be relatively stable in total, that they're not necessarily going to necessarily adjust. At least that's, unless I misheard that. But so if the goal was 0 for the first quarter, then we 100% met that goal of 0.
What that actually does is would give us an extra 5 points in that category because we met our goal of doing 0. So there's, just different ways. Yeah.
Mr. Scott?
A goal I can achieve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question under financial stability, passenger trips per revenue hour. We've exceeded that goal. And the question I have on that is that, how did we get, our ridership has been declining. So is that, like, comparing year-to-date versus year-to-date, was that just we targeted, we want this many passengers per revenue hour? Where did we, to me, it seems like, I'm just wondering if that, what reality is that reflecting?
We'll point out Cassandra back here,
Okay.
who's taking charge in this.
Hi.
Hi.
We looked at the trend line and picked something for the end of the year that we thought we could, so could we beat the trend line? So we looked at the last 2 years. And so if I remember correctly, the annual goal was 17. Now, understanding that we are seeing ridership fall, we may beat that in the first quarter, but we'll be able to track it in the second and third quarters, and it gives us an indication of where we need to make changes in the system in order to improve that. But again, the short answer is it was based on the trend line, not as a beating the trend line.
So we're looking.
So it's on declining trend.
Right.
Okay. So we
I
looked
thought we were
at
like
the
18.
past 2 years is what we're using benchmark for.
Right. So let's stop the loss as opposed to try to beat something that we can't beat.
And so where did we end up at? You said it was 18?
I think it was 17.
17.
We've been running. All right.
Does that sound right?
Any other questions? Okay, what, in the one where we...
Here, it's 18.64 this month, on the latest month.
In the American Bus benchmark where we had the lowest score, there are a number of benchmarks. Which one are we tracking here of the ones that actually gave us the lowest score?
So we looked at the report that they give us at the end of the year that shows how we rank among all of the peers for the various metrics. And we chose the 8 metrics where we were below the median compared to our peers. And our goal is to improve over the course of the year in at least 4 of those 8 metrics. I think we have a...
And those for the driver training,
Oh, thank you.
passenger injuries, vehicle collisions, and on-time performance.
So this is my favorite goal of all the ones, and the one that I take responsibility for, since the benchmarking is kind of like my little baby. And of course, that's the one red one on there, compared to all the departments.
Brad, would you get with program, please?
But I think it's important to
Not that the
note.
departments didn't had their own goals, but this whole strategy, the high-level strategy here is that we are a data-driven organization. So the idea behind this one is that we look at the data on how we perform throughout the whole organization, and we focus not on the areas that we knock it out of the park every single time, which is cost, but we focus on the areas that we are deficient in or below average in, and try to improve performance in those areas. So the benchmarking does have like 400 different metrics, but they do have a summary report at the end that they pick about 25 that they give a nice little summary of. And there happened to be 8, as Trish just said, there were 8 areas of the 25 that PSTA was below average. Now, we were way over average. We were number 1 in operating costs. But the idea is not to focus on operating costs so much, but focus, sorry, Debbie, areas to focus on the 8 areas that we're below average on. And those are the ones that Eric just mentioned, like passenger injuries and on-time performance and a few other areas. And to try to get better, just pick those areas from the benchmarking that were below average, and then compare results from year to year to see if we are improving in those areas at all. We're only comparing our own performance. You know, we don't have to get better above average in 1 year, because I don't think it's just that we are focused on those areas and getting better in those areas. And so we only got better in 2. The goal was to get better in 4. In at least the first quarter, we only got better in 2. So that's why we only got 5 points. But we've had a lot of discussion about this one, because I think this is a really good one, to have especially our operating folks, focus on areas where we are, below average, that focus on those areas.
Commissioner Johnson?
So this one, we get an annual number from the benchmarking group, right? So each quarter, we will look at our quarter's performance against that annual target for the benchmark.
No, just against last year, just against our performance in that same metric last year. So a year-by-year improvement gets you the point.
So in one quarter, we might meet all 4 of them, and then the next quarter, we might meet only 2 of them, and then the next quarter, we might meet 3. I mean, it's that kind of thing.
This is one where that year-to-date is going to be important, and it's going to be very revealing at the end of the year, what we've managed to improve and sustain.
So you'd kind of expect, well, okay, we met 2 this quarter, maybe next quarter we'll meet 3, maybe in the following quarter we'd still meet 3, but in the 4th quarter we might meet all 4. And so you'd see that improvement over the quarters, but yet the total year-to-date score would be the average for the 4 quarters.
That's true.
Yeah, that will be one where we measure it at the end of the year and compare our end of the year figures to our previous year figures. In general, most of the year-to-date metrics are going to be calculated as an average as we go along, but there are a couple that will be cumulative or measured in this way, where it's where did we stand at the end of the year.
And is there a instruction sheet that talks about that?
I believe there is an metrics. Did we print those out for everybody? We do have a sheet of parameters that lists the definitions and the method by which the metrics are measured. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, yeah. Commissioner Ivers?
Just a comment, really. I mean, first of all, I think, Brad, you said it, this is good stuff overall. I mean, I think it's good that we're going in the metrics direction. And I just think we need to really look at these goals and what they are, and goal points. And I think, to your point, as we see a year play out, I'll reserve comments as to whether I think we're shooting too low, because it seems awfully green. It's like, okay, we're done. And I think that we need to be a lot tougher on ourselves, and again, it's all relative. If we got out of 100, we got 90 this time, and 92, and then 88, and 94. It's just a number. And I think I think we really need to be hard, and need to be tough, and need to be aspiring, and need to be all of that. I'm not sure that we see it, but again, that's just a observation, not a judgment at this point. So
this is an important year to set some of those benchmarks.
Yeah.
And really see what.
Are we being too tough? Are we being too easy? Yeah, because I do think this could be valuable for improvement. That's what we're always trying to do.
Yeah.
Board members, all the employees. So, do we do enough here, do you think, to address either perceived or actual, inadequacies of the organization as it relates to non-users? In other words, is there a metric? Is there something out there that we can? I think our goal should be get more new people on the buses, for instance. How, and I'm not saying we can. I don't know how to do that, but Brad and I've talked a little bit about the whole rate structure. Frankly, I think it's too high. Should be lower. Get more people out there. Get more people riding the buses. If we're ever going to make a change, we've got to get people on buses. And so, anyway, that's just. And I don't know if that's incorporated anywhere here. That are we doing enough? Those special projects that what did we do back in June? We did a pilot, and then we just did another one in December. And are we doing enough of that to get new riders? I think that's something that somewhere needs to be factored in. Is our organization doing enough to reach out to new people? So, we're only getting 1.5% of our population on the buses, so we need to do better. I think Brad said 10% would be a goal at some point, but that's awfully high. But still, I think we need to be thinking. So just a thought.
Thank you very much, folks. I appreciate
Great
it.
stuff. Great stuff.
And see, when you have one of these things, then everybody has lots of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good, though. Thank you.
And thanks to Trish and Eric, and they are the champions of the Champions Committee. So they have been having these same debates that we just discussed about all this stuff. It's very complex, but I think they've really made great headway in getting it started and to be part of our automatic routine. That's great.
Okay, now, we go to reports.
All right, we'll take a look at the monthly and year-to-date financial reports first. And we reviewed the month of December. Now, in December, we were about 1% off of our targeted budget of $19.6 million, with $19.4 million actual. Our revenues came in below budget, primarily due to the timing of property taxes and state reimbursements of state grant revenues. The state tends to be, this year they were a little bit late getting our grants approved, so through the system for us to bring to the year, so that corrects itself during the course of the year. On the expense side, we are under budget by $561,000. Now, here's an item, the very first line item under expenses, fringe benefits, is under by 16% due to the timing of accrued vacation expense. Here is something that made us look very good when we looked up here on the chart. The reason for this is something new that we're doing with unions, where we're front-loading their vacation time, and then they take it throughout the course of the year. By the end of the year, it's one big wash of what they've earned and what they've taken. But right now, it's skewing it in this first part of the year. One of the things Michael and I talked about is to help present a more accurate picture as we go forward into the next fiscal year, is even though this has a zero budget associated with it, that we will put it in and show that we would anticipate that the vacation is going to get front-loaded at this point and then taken over the course of the year. So I think it'll help give a more accurate picture from a budgetary and actual standpoint. Did I explain that correctly, Michael?
Yes.
Anything else?
Question.
Yeah.
And just a comment, and I know we have time limits here, but I just, again, just on that point, on this chart that we just went through, and it said annual budget variance, and it showed us doing better. And I think, when you're within 2%, I think that's certainly value. That's a good thing. But at the same time, we didn't do as good a job on the cost side, budget versus the variance. Now, at the end of the year, we might get there.
Right.
But, so to me, it's almost like, okay, so the revenues, we didn't get within 1 or 2%, so that should be something negative. I'm talking about as it relates to this.
Right.
And then we really didn't do well on the expense side as it relates to the budget. The variance I'm talking about is pretty high. And the surplus was right on target. So it's almost like, do we get 3 points because the bottom line is good and then minus point for the other two? So you're does that, do you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying, and just so you know, number one, we're looking at just the month of December, year
Yeah, I
to
know,
dates on the
I
next page.
understand.
But philosophically, to your point, part of which is we don't always have as much control. You could say you have control over every expense in the book and every revenue to some degree, but there may be lagging to it. So we see something happen where revenues are coming down. We, as a management team, get together and say, if something is happening over in the revenue side, or if something happens where Henry has to have more expenses to fix buses that were in an accident, whatever the case may be, we're learning to work as a team to say, if maintenance needs help, I have to give up something. If revenues are suffering, I have to give up something, so that we can stay on an overall target for the bottom line. And when we look at where we were on a year-to-date basis, we did come out, even though the 1 month was not, it was close, but not quite on target. We did come up at 6.2% above budget.
Yeah, and I
It's not a
think
surplus.
to your point, I think it's a good point, and that's why I was saying, like, if your overall comes in right in that, then maybe you should get 3 points for that or something, but
Mhm.
then if your individuals are off, maybe you should get a minus point, because I think what we're trying to do is we're just trying to do, again, something to do better from, and if
Right,
if we pat ourselves on the back and say, look, we did great, well, we didn't do great in pieces in the first quarter. By the end of the year, they worked itself out and you were fine. And so at the end of the year, you have actually done what you, but it kind of moves around a little bit. I don't know, I just think sometimes we.
I think that's the whole point to me on all of this, and of course, for me, every manager would have staying in budget as part of their individual departmental goals. But it's, I think Cassandra, when we went through this process, probably put it the best and simplest terms is, we're working on a school project. We all have to pull our weight. And if one thing happens over here, we all have to work as a team to make it happen. And that's really helping to pull us together in a cross-functional way that I think has been happening, but it brings it even more so together. And your point, we did do well on the first quarter. A big piece of it on the expense side was how we account for the fringe benefits. So that's something, as we become better allocators of the budget, better budgeters, because we want to get, the budget variance should be really small.
Well, that's really what I was.
That's what you're getting
Yeah, that's
at.
what I was getting at. I wasn't
end
trying to
of
be
the
overly
day,
critical of this, just how does
it
it
should be small.
translate to this? That's all.
So
Thank
we
you.
did end up on a year-to-date basis with $1.3 million of positive budget variance. So that's excellent.
Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might have just answered my own question here, but just seeing that purchase transportation, TD expense is 69.4% under budget, and I was curious as to what was driving that, because our TD ridership has grown so much. But see on the next line, it says alternate expense, 42.6% over budget due to TD late shift program. So are those two?
They're working, I think you're seeing a little bit of a shift there in that. You're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just where those expenses are hitting has been shifted, is
Yeah,
what you're saying?
People are now taking TD late shift rather than, they're doing it in an alternate way, because you do see a correlation. Is there anything else that came up during your analysis, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the shift too is between the DART expense line and the line above that, the TD expense line. So more people are taking the trips under DART than under TD.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Commissioner Johnson?
Can you talk a little bit about the trolleys expense being over budget due to it being budgeted net affairs?
We have traditionally budgeted the expense side net affairs. And we did so again this year. This is the first year under the new contract, where now we're actually collecting the fares ourselves. So you'll be seeing an increase, I think it was around $400,000 is what the revenues are. So we will be seeing hopefully a positive variance on the revenue side at the end of the day by $400,000. And on the expense side, we will be over budget because we didn't really allocate that appropriately this year. I'm very big on trying to get things to a gross basis where expenses are gross and revenues are where they are. We just weren't too sure how it would really shake out this year, since we're the first time doing it.
So conceivably, the following year, we'd have the data that we could base it on to move
Right.
forward on.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you on that.
On the quarterly reports, we have quite a few of them in the package. And I think, we've got a little bit of time here. I will have Michael talk about the investment and reserve report.
Where is that? Is that in? Oh,
So, at the end of the quarter, fiscal year, the current fiscal year, the end of the quarter ending December 31st, we have approximately $67.6 million invested as compared to the $48.7 invested at the end of 9/30. And the majority of that is due to the timing of the receipts of the property taxes. The majority of those funds are invested at Bank United, a few different money market accounts, as well as a few certificates of deposits. On the reserve report, as of 12/31, we still have that same $67.6 million in investments, $303,000 in an FTA restricted account. We have our 2 months operating reserve based on our new fiscal year 2018 budget. We have our $4,019,000 estimated self-insurance reserves that was based on our new actuary report that was done for our fiscal year 17 financial statements. And then we have our capital reserve of $27.8 million.
Okay. On that, the interest rates are going up nationally. These funds roll pretty quickly so that we will start to see some incremental increases in our interest rates.
The CDs roll, they're 12-month CDs. The money market, I think, went up this quarter from 1% to 1.25%, and it's already at 1.4% currently. And we're going to be bidding out a couple more CDs soon to put some of that capital.
What kind of impact does that have, in our overall?
I was just looking at the financial statements, our draft financial statements this year that haven't been issued yet. It looks like between 16 and 17, investment interest income went up about $185,000. So it's pretty substantial.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on those areas? Okay. Okay, thank you.
The next report I'd like to point out is our fuel report. And as Commissioner Scott had mentioned, fuel prices are rising. We've locked in a good portion of the fuel. And unfortunately, the average price per gallon for this quarter was like $1.77 versus our budget of $1.73. However, Henry released his much coveted monthly maintenance report last night. And we're seeing, because we are under budget in fuel, the hybrid buses have seen a 15% increase in efficiency, and the diesel about 2.7% increase in efficiency. So while we're paying more on the average price per gallon of $1.77 versus what we budgeted $1.73, our fuel economy is much better, which is helping to drive us to be under budget. So thank you, Henry, whatever you're doing to the buses, thank you, to improve their fuel economy.
Yeah, don't divulge any secrets.
So Debbie, how much on the fixed price of $69.88? Do we have that bought out? That price bought out
for the year for about 65%.
That's great. That's good. Okay. Yeah, this is a good report. Thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Any other questions or comments?
There's 2 more reports in here, one of which is our quarterly capital report. And what we do is we have every project broken out in quite detail. But one of our significant projects that we're working on, 2 things, one of which we just had the grand opening, was the Clearwater Beach Transit Center, which is moving along. And then we also have our regional fair media project, which is Flamingo. Last night we met with the track committee, and we are proceeding with testing phase of our fair media. We've been doing it internally as employees, and we are now going to be reaching out to the public to become testers, and that'll start effective with April 1st. We expect to go live now. It's been pushed out from August to September on this, and it's just really, really exciting. And in the background, we are working with HART to try to come up with a cohesive regional fair that'll be for both entities. So pretty exciting stuff that's going on here. So those are 2 key projects that we've been working on that I thought I would point out. And the last report that is always sent to the board quarterly is our contracts. So we have this listed from the highest level contracts down to the lowest level for our expenses. And we've talked about one of the biggest ones today, which is health insurance. Any questions on the various quarterlies?
Any questions? Great. Thank you very much for keeping us up to speed on this stuff. Okay. Ridership.
Thank you. I guess. Well, in the spirit of what Debbie just said, you know, this Flamingo Fairs project, which has been going on for like a year now, and really has been focused mostly on the fact that it's regional up till now, that we're doing it with heart. What I think is maybe less known is, you know, the not too long-term plan is to completely change all the fare systems at PSTA for every rider, not just the ones going to Tampa, but every rider will get rid of the paper cards ultimately, and hopefully significantly reduce cash usage and go to these new types of fares, the plastic chip cards or the smartphone app. And in addition to just that change technology which is going to be a major thing for our customers, and making sure that we don't make it too difficult for our riders to be able to access these new cards and change the system that they're comfortable with. We're trying to work closer and closer as a region on marrying up all the fares to be consistent across county by county, which has never been done before. And so I feel a little bit like, I don't know if you all, like my family, have been watching this Netflix thing called The Crown, about the Queen of England. But that show is all about how she's the Queen of England, and she's totally in charge. She has all power, and yet she can't get anything she wants done. And I feel like that a little bit, because I hear what the Finance Committee is constantly saying about, well, let's focus on ridership, and let's try to implement some programs to increase ridership. Well, our friends around at the other counties are not maybe as focused on the same things that we are focused on. And so we're going to be implementing this Flamingo Fairs transition over the next year, and it looks like it's going to be done in 2 phases. Phase number 1 is we're going to be changing our fares, likely not necessarily in a way that I think it's going to really have an effect on ridership. I think it'll be pretty neutral toward ridership, but it will marry them up with Hillsborough, Pasco, and maybe Manatee. And we'll have consistent fares. And then phase 2 I get what I want, which is to then experiment with lowering the fares as a second, or not necessarily lowering all the fares, but making it more of like an incentive-based thing, like the more you ride, the less you pay, kind of something like that. But in order not to confuse our riders, certainly, and our whole policy process, we're going to do this in 2 phases. So the first thing you'll see, hopefully this summer, is a adjustment to our fare policy that will marry up, for the first time, all of the fares in the Tampa Bay region to be consistent as we roll out this new technology. And then hopefully by next fall, maybe by then, or maybe, that would be my dream, next fall. I don't know if that's going to happen. Then we'll be able to institute some of these other fare things that I think will have an impact on ridership. Frustration in some white people. You can see the ridership is still declining. We do the sort of our guesstimate of what's happening to the ridership, the summary at the bottom of the table, that we can identify things that happen locally or that just happen with the calendar that do have a effect on ridership, that can kind of explain roughly half of the drop, and then the other half that we put down at the bottom, called national trend, is essentially what we can't explain by anything that at least our brilliant staff can identify. I wanted to point out a couple other things. If you look at the 4th line down, DART trips, up 11.8% for the year, and that is exactly driving the costs too. You saw that purchase transportation in Debbie's reports was way over budget. It's because we pay care ride per trip 30-some per wheelchair trip. So every time a new person rides DART, that costs us 30, and they almost all ride up and back, so that's $75 more. So it's good to have increasing ridership, but it would be better if they were on the bus that we already are paying the driver, one fixed price for.
Care Ride's doing too good of a job?
They are. I mean, we think that 11.8% is largely due to the fact that Care Ride is doing such an awesome job, especially compared to our previous contracts. They're very reliable. At the last board meeting, I think some board members asked, if you look down toward the bottom of the complaints per 100,000 passenger trips, DART is way up, 144% increase. I had to check that out, and it's true that that's because it went from 2 to 6. I mean, it's just such a small number of complaints on Care Ride that, a major, just any number of complaints.
Well, it hasn't made a dent in the ridership for DART.
Right, it has not, it has not. So I think I would just point those things out. Related to our scorecard and the fact that we're trying, one of the areas of focus for the benchmarking, the last one about focusing on areas that we're below average on, is on-time performance. And on-time performance, you can see on there, about toward the bottom, is doing better. It's better than it was a year ago. But I think from looking at the long-term trend, there is a seasonality to that. There's a seasonality aspect to on-time performance. We're more on time in the winter than we are in spring break time. In addition, we made a change. PSTA had always rounded up with our on-time performance. And we had essentially always allowed operators to be as much as 59 seconds early before we called them early. Which as a rider, that is just horrible, to have an early bus. But, or you could be 5 minutes and 59 seconds late. So essentially, that's -1 to 6 as a on-time performance. And that's what we've been reporting to the board. That's the way our technology, our clever device, on-time, real-time system has been tracking it. And then that is different than the American Bus Benchmarking Standard, which is 0. You can't be 1 second late. 0 to 4:59. And just on September 1st, so quarter number 1, that's one of the reasons that we didn't make it here. Quarter number 1, we made the change as of September 1st. So we are holding ourselves to a slightly tougher standard on-time performance. I think actually this January report is the first time, 84, 81, of the first quarter that we've seen an increase in that. So it kind of goes to the point, well, that, how much of it can we control, or how much of it is related to some kind of change that we made. But we're rolling with it. We can still track it, and so I just thought that was kind of interesting, because that is an area we're focusing on. That involves, of course, our operational people, but it also really involves our scheduling folks to schedule the routes so that they can run on time. Anyway.
Brad,
Okay, good.
as far as the on-time performance, do the drivers have real-time information as far as their timing?
Yeah, they see it right on the little monitor. They know.
Because it'll be interesting to see how that changes behavior. Knowing that if they're early, it's going to count against them. And so are they then, I'm thinking about the non-riders of PSTA, dealing with PSTA. Is the bus now going 20 in a 45 zone because it's trying not to be early, thereby causing a ripple effect with other traffic patterns? Staying on time for our passengers, but possibly leading to greater frustrations elsewhere in the system.
That's why it's so important to have the scheduling department be as accurate as possible with the every time point to make sure that drivers are not going 20 in a 7:45 just to say, to not be early.
How are complaints are handled by non-riders? Do we have a metric, or do we ever get calls from the public complaining about?
My blood pressure goes up sometimes.
That's just sometimes, huh?
I mean, if I get behind a bus and it stops and they're early, and it's like, okay, now what? So,
because I wonder if that starts going more into effect, and the drivers, and I want the drivers to be on time, but I want them to be on time because of scheduling, and it's the normal flow and operation.
Yeah.
And not, it doesn't help our case to get more people involved on the buses and involved in being supportive of transit if they're constantly frustrated by what they do see. Not knowing why it's happening, they're in their car going, why are we going 20 miles an hour? It's bad enough it's only 30 on Ulmerton with normal traffic. So I just want, I don't know if the having the driver have real-time information, I mean, does it then cause, is there speeding to catch up? Are they slowing down? How are their behaviors when operating the vehicle being changed to stay within that parameter?
Well,
and is it affecting
generally,
other?
the scheduling department tries to time the time points along the route, on the road, to be hardly so. There's no slack time. That there's no possible way for them to be early at those times, or very rare. To avoid that, and then they put padding at the end of the line. So the very last time point, which is usually at a transit center or a mall, they'll put the extra minutes there. And then the riders don't usually complain if they get to their ultimate end of the line destination early.
Right.
There's no complaints about that.
Well, and then I realize that those time points, they then wait to catch up to time, if they happen to be early. And I've experienced the bus being early and going by, and it's okay. We'll go walk up to the time point and then sit there for 6 or 7 minutes. So, I just wonder with the bus driver being able to see those time, know where their time is along the way, how it changes behavior, and then how it affects the remainder of the driving populace.
Every bus driver that I've ever met, and every single one of the 360 PSTA drivers, knows exactly every single second of the day they're on time or they're late. They know there's a subliminal message by all the riders on the bus to the back of their head.
The big sign that comes the bus.
They know exactly. And I've never heard a driver say, there's way too much time. I'm just way early. They always say they're late. And there's not enough time built into the schedule. And we need to give them more time.
Well, so then if that's the case, then we're changing the on-time metric, then the loss of the 0 to -1 should be a non-event in on-time performance, because if you're saying we're already on time or a little bit late anyway, then that, and so we're only losing that extra minute at the end, right? It went from 5 minutes and 59 seconds to 4 minutes and 59 seconds on the upper end.
I don't know that. I mean, I think there were some cases where we were early too. We were in that 0 to 59, yeah.
Right, and so and that's what I'm saying, is it'll be interesting to see as from an on-time perspective, if we lose that, 0 to -59 second window as being on time, how that then changes, behavior a little bit more. And if it does slow, because I think we might start seeing more input from the general populace, behind buses, complaining that they're not going the speed limit, they're not moving fast enough. So it's just interesting thing to keep in mind as we start tracking how that behavior is changing.
Quick question.
Commissioner Akers?
Yeah, just real quick, on this operating statistics that you do, to get maybe, this is this year, prior year, how difficult is it to get 2 or 3 more years at the same thing? In other words, could you switch this over and just get 5 running years? Or is it, you have that information, how difficult would it be to create a report just to see trends? Is that like, I don't want to be taking hours and hours to develop reports. We have the information, but just think about it. We don't jump on it. And back to the earliness of things. If we just had some little pullovers and get people out of the road, buses out of the road. I keep saying that until I see one. Then they wouldn't worry about being early. They just pull over and be out of the traffic, and wait, and then they're caught up and off they go, but.
We just opened our first one of them yesterday at Clearwater Beach. The low pull off.
Yeah, that's nice. That's all I got, thanks.
One other question, and it kind of goes back to the earlier point about passenger trips per revenue hour. So we have a goal of 17. Here we're showing year-to-date of 19.25 versus last year was 19.16. And so I realize that we're saying that 17 is the trend, but in the first quarter, or year-to-date, we're actually trending better than we were this time last year at 19. So I just want to make sure that this goal of 17 is if we're setting a goal of 17 and we're doing 19, it means we're doing better. Is that correct?
That's right.
So is 17 the right number, or is 19 closer to the right number, or 18? Because there's a significant difference. 17 to 19.25 is a pretty big.
Brad already said they're padding their numbers, so.
I think we've said
everything but my numbers.
Everything
numbers.
So it's just something to be mindful of again and I'm sure more board members when it gets to the board level are going to have the same sort of questions as to why is it so significantly different than what we're actually seeing, and here we have a year-to-date trend that's actually increasing and getting better.
Okay, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. With regard to the DART client trips, because it's increasing, have we considered doing something to incentivize or recognize those DART riders who choose to ride the bus instead? I know that the Salt Lake City program had they had an annual appreciation dinner for DART riders that rode the bus, and it kind of made it, a badge of courage, and I don't.
Yeah, is Ross here? No, Ross. Talk to Ross. Ross and I have had this debate all the time. Yeah, there's a lot of things that transit systems do to try to encourage folks that could otherwise ride the paratransit at $30 and something a trip to ride the regular bus.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What if we gave them the TD rate to get on the bus?
What?
What if we gave them the TD rate to get on the bus, or a bus pass?
That could be better just to give them free.
Well, I mean, already it's cheaper for them to ride. It's half the price to ride the bus as it is to ride DART.
I'm sure this has been thought of before, but if we brought that in-house as opposed to contractually, flying those rides, could we do it less expensively?
No,
No?
definitely not.
Okay.
No. I mean, one of the issues with Care Ride is that forever they had only owned wheelchair accessible vans, and they were just providing people that had a device trips, and then we were sending what we call ambulatory people that don't have a device but maybe have some other kind of disability in the cabs.
Right.
Well, as of a year ago, October 1, they're doing it all, and they put in their proposal that they were going to buy a whole bunch of Priuses. And they were going to charge us a lower cost for the sedan riding. But they have not, they bought some Priuses, but not as many or not as fast as I think, even they have thought that they would. So that's another challenge. We're working with them, and, trying to get them to carry more than one person in a car to try to increase that, to save money. We're trying to mitigate this trend of increasing ridership on paratransit.
But are they charging us the same rate for ambulatory as a wheelchair rate?
If they go in a van, they charge us the higher rate.
Oops. Yeah, that sounds like they're not following the contract.
Well, yeah.
All right, any other questions? Okay, we're getting close on time here. Future meeting subjects, anything you need to know?
Well, next month I am I will be coming to you with a presentation of our benchmarking results. We just got the report. And some of the issues about the declining ridership, you know, there's now been some studies that have come out around the country, and I'm going to present some of that data too on what these academic studies are identifying as some of the issues and things that we can do about it.
Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. This will end our meeting. Start off.
Yes.
Oh,
All
okay.
yours.
Great.
It was the official, this will end our meeting.
Okay.
Cool.
It's a lot better now. Actually, it's not too bad. Yeah, I usually don't. I can go if I want to, but I don't.
Yeah.